Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here because today we are unpacking something that literally affects almost every single one of us. We're diving into this really fascinating, highly clinical 25-day traffic intelligence dossier straight from the roads of Thiruvananthapuram. We're going to break down the exact anatomy of a near miss, using this incredible data to understand the real mechanics of just surviving the daily urban commute.
Now, I want you to take a second and think about your own drive or ride to work today. What actually separates a perfectly routine, boring commute from an absolute disaster? Well, we all like to think it's our own brilliant driving skills, right? But the reality exposed by this data is honestly kind of chilling. Avoiding a major accident on congested city roads often has very little to do with skill and absolutely everything to do with pure luck and the desperate defensive reactions of the people around you. Okay, let's dive right into this. Our investigation is broken down into 6 main parts. First up, the near-miss ecosystem, then high-risk driving maneuvers, environmental hazard compounders, the psychology of risk, the chain reaction effect, and finally, keys to roadway survival. All right, starting off with Section 1, the near-miss ecosystem. Let's quickly establish the environment and the sheer scope of the data we're looking at here. The shocking core premise of this entire dossier is this. Between May 18th and June 11th, 2026, across various urban roads, junctions, and highway segments, investigators logged exactly 11 significant near misses. And the most incredible part of that? 0 collisions, not a single one. In every single one of these 11 events, disaster was avoided by mere inches. So we aren't actually looking at accidents today, we're looking at that invisible matrix of close calls that happen literally right before the metal crunches. And what's wild is how this danger didn't just happen randomly. It evolved. It escalated over those 25 days. Phase 1 started with individual isolated errors, things like unsignaled turns or folks not wearing helmets. But by Phase 2, this escalated into conflicts with vulnerable road users, like pedestrians getting squeezed out. Then, moving into Phase 3, it shifted to complex, multi-vehicle urban risks. Think dooring and chain reactions. Finally, by Phase 4, we see these critical decision failures. We're talking high-consequence maneuvers executed with 0 visibility. The chaos just naturally stacked and multiplied as the days went on. Moving right along to Section 2, high-risk driving maneuvers. Let's shift our focus to the actual physical actions drivers took that push the risk dial firmly into the red zone. Now, what's really interesting about this is how systematically the danger is categorized. This risk assessment matrix breaks down the most perilous physical behaviors from the report. Just look at highway lane splitting and blind U-turns, right there at the top, both marked as critical severity and high likelihood. These aren't just minor infractions, right? These are maneuvers that fundamentally violate the physics of shared space on a roadway. Then you have pedestrian conflicts and passenger hunting, which, as we'll see, play out with terrifying frequency. To really bring that matrix to life, consider this quote describing an incident on May 18th on NH66. The reporting vehicle was driving parallel to a Hyundai Venue at highway speeds, in the dark. Out of nowhere, a Citroën EV driver, instead of just waiting for a safe gap, attempted to aggressively thread the needle right between the two cars. The observer actually noted the vehicles were arranged diagonally, resembling pieces in a game of Tetris forced into an impossibly tight space. The clearances were literally just inches. One microscopic steering correction by any of those 3 drivers? Boom, you've got a fatal multi-car pileup. That brings us to Section 3, environmental hazard compounders. So we've got the bad behaviors down, but how exactly does the physical world turn a poor driving choice into a deadly one? Well, bad driving doesn't happen in a vacuum. Environmental hazard compounders drastically narrow the margin for human error. Take an elevated curve on Vanchua Court Road, for instance. It completely masks a parked vehicles suddenly pulling out. Or waterlogged margins in Minim Kalam that force pedestrians right into the active traffic lane, creating a super dangerous conflict. Nighttime limitations hide unlit motorcycles, and complex high-speed merge points, like the Matatara elevated highway entry, can turn an impatient lane split into a literal life-or-death gamble. Basically, the environment acts as a massive amplifier for bad decisions. Let's look at a specific micronarrative from June 3rd that perfectly captures this environmental compounding. Picture the Kunampuram road stretch leading to the Ayurveda College. It's elevated, it's narrow, and it's absolutely choked with parked cars. Suddenly, an auto rickshaw stops abruptly to hunt for a passenger. A pedestrian steps out to cross. And right in the middle of this incredibly tight, chaotic bottleneck, a driver walking back to his parked Hyundai Verna, who is deeply distracted by a phone call, by the way, blindly swings his car door wide open into the active traffic lane. The physical constraints of the road meant the reporting driver had nowhere to swerve. They had to rely entirely on slamming the brakes to avoid a total catastrophe.
Now, into Section 4, the psychology of risk. This perfectly sets up the climax of our investigation. What are the human behavioral flaws and the psychological triggers actually driving this chaos?
I absolutely love this visceral metaphor from the dossier. So on May 20th, near the Chaka signal, an auto rickshaw driver was accelerating to overtake a bus. Suddenly, he spots two pedestrians waving for a ride on the footpath. Without checking his mirrors, without signaling at all, he violently swerved 45 degrees across the lane to grab them. The observer described it like a fly suddenly getting trapped in jackfruit sap. It was just an abrupt, instinctive lunge toward an opportunity, completely blind to the consequences. It's this intense commercial impatience that just completely overrides all basic road safety logic.
What we're really looking at here is a battle between two distinct mindsets. On one side, we have impulsive maneuvers, corner cutting, severe situational awareness deficits, and this highly dangerous me-first mentality, where drivers just assume everyone else is going to magically hit the brakes for them. Contrast that with predictable driving on the other side, actually using turn signals, showing some patience, and doing defensive scanning. The data shows time and time again that a lack of predictability is the direct catalyst for almost every single near disaster logged in this 25-day period.
Next up, Section 5, the chain reaction effect. And this introduces what might be the absolute most terrifying psychological phenomenon observed in the entire dossier, where poor decisions literally spread among drivers like a virus. Consider this concept: behavioral copycat driving, or herd mentality. It's basically the assumption that a highly aggressive or risky path is totally safe simply because the vehicle in front of you just happened to survive it. This was anchored by a terrifying incident on June 5th at the Infosys signal. A rider on a Pulsar NS200 aggressively zigzagged through some impossibly tight gaps between moving cars. But it didn't end there. Another biker, and then an auto rickshaw blindly copied that exact same weaving path. They just assumed the dynamic, shifting gaps would magically stay open for their differing vehicle sizes. It's a rolling chain reaction of hazard, and it is incredibly dangerous.
And to quickly visualize where these chain reactions and conflicts were most concentrated, we can look at the top incident locations. Pothen Code Road takes the top spot with 3 major incidents, followed closely by the high-speed NH66 corridor and the Inchicle area. These highly congested intersections, elevated curves, and major commercial corridors, they bear the absolute brunt of the traffic chaos. For sure, these are the exact environments where that herd mentality driving proves the most prevalent and, unfortunately, the most dangerous.
All right, finally, we arrive at Section 6. Keys to roadway survival. We've seen the data, we've analyzed the behavior, and we've mapped out the locations. Now, let's wrap up this explainer with some actionable, absolutely critical takeaways for your next commute. So, the crucial point is captured in these 3 survival roles. Step 1, predictability is safety. A lack of turn signals and these sudden parabolic swerves, they cause disasters. Being predictable is your absolute best armor out there. Step 2, defensive driving saves lives. In every single one of the 11 near misses we talked about, a collision was only avoided because the reporting driver was actively scanning, predicting erratic behavior, and hitting the brakes. Active scanning is your only rail safety net. And step 3, vulnerable users bear the brunt. Pedestrians forced into waterlogged roads suffer the most from our impatience behind the wheel. We really have to look out for them. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Have you ever assumed a gap would stay open just because the car in front of you made it through? Honestly, it is so easy to fall into that herd mentality, to let commercial impatience or a me-first attitude completely take over when we're running late. But as this Thiruvananthapuram dossier proves, survival isn't about saving 5 seconds by threading the needle. It's about patience, predictability, and breaking that chain reaction. Thank you so much for exploring this data with me today. Stay safe, stay predictable, and keep actively scanning out there.